Meeting to order of the December 17th Airport Authority meeting. There's a quorum. Approval of the minutes for the November 19th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion we approve the minutes of the November 19th meeting.
And I'll go ahead and second that.
Okay. Is there any, do I have a vote?
Aye.
All those in favor of approving that?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are passed. Chip, you want to give an update on the runway status or the operations?
Yep, looking at that right now. As of Monday, 3 warm red lights, 6 taxiway lights, and 2 happy bulbs were out. And Kyle was going to try and get that resolved by yesterday. I haven't heard from him.
I haven't heard from him either. But
so-
these are things he can do, I think, is that?
Yeah,
Is that right?
yeah, he was going to start work. He said, I'll be around tomorrow,
Okay.
resolve most of these items. I think the three of the taxiway lights are the ones that had to do the transformers on, and we're waiting on Moody's to come
Oh, so
do that.
Moody's
Moody's.
never came?
I'll have to ask him. I haven't asked Kyle, since the last meeting, but he said they had 6 out, 3 were from the last meeting. So I don't know if they've called him or they had to order parts. I'm not sure. Also, one thing he did note, which Continental Motors replaced the windsock and pressure washed the segmented circles. So he said all looks very good. So anyhow,
Okay.
thank you, Continental.
Will you check on and make sure that Moody's is not, I mean, that's the problem we had before, the
Okay.
dragging their feet, not doing things in a timely way.
Text him while we're talking. Okay.
That's 45 days. That's a long time, so Chip, you want to go give us an update on the flight feeder system?
Yeah, I've been exchanging emails with David Shearer, and we're going to, the one we looked at, which I thought would be more reasonable, is the flight aware one. I sent them an email, and they said there's so many around this area that the free installation we probably don't qualify for, but we're going to go ahead and submit the application and then just see what they'll give us one or what they'll charge for. But that's the one that has the $95 a month with certain reports that Amy said she could put those in a graphic form that would really look good. So David and I are going to get together. I started the application. I sent it to him. We've got to take different pictures when we submit it. So it's work in progress.
Okay. So, I mean, let's try to, first of next year, pull the trigger and go forward and get something
Okay.
going. Even if we don't sign a contract for just a year, we can always go a different way, after the end of the year.
Yeah, I don't know if they require a contract. I don't think it's as stringent as Maritime System was.
Well, it's not as expensive. for
Yeah,
sure.
it's not as expensive.
Right.
Because a lot of that FlightAware, they do free anyhow if there's a need.
All right, update the FAA-based aircraft inventory program. Wow. I did, over the last couple of weeks, working with David Shearer, we had basically kind of researched and found all the planes that are basically based there, which is a big deal. It's a big deal because that's how the FAA does our funding. I think we have 49 based airplanes, 4 jets, 2 helicopters, and like 9 multi-engine airplanes. So that's all done. We hadn't done it since 2014, but it's probably a good thing that we probably, we were actually asked by the FAA to do it, so we probably need to do it more, put it on our to-do list, maybe do it every couple of years or so, but it was a good exercise. So
Especially if we have more, because that affects
that's
our
exactly
funding.
right. Number 7, discussion and approval of hosting the 2024 Air Race Classic. In your package, there's a kind of a financial projection of the economic impacts of hosting it. Basically, and these are pretty conservative projections based upon like 2 hotel nights per individual, and not very many people come in from the community, but basically has a positive economic impact of about $80,000 on the community. I've gotten a tentative commitment from Continental to sponsor it with us, and the same thing with Jack said he would work with the city to sponsor it. So what I'd like to do is get a motion and approval to host the 2024 Air Race Classic, which is basically what I call the Paddle Puff Derby.
That's what it used to be named.
Yeah, and and our total commitment would be $12,000.
That's split between the city and Continental and,
I don't, Continental, we had I think Continental committed although we couldn't get their attention because it is 4 years away, but
Yeah.
I think, yeah. And I know Jack said he would, I mean,
Mhm.
the city would do it because they were really the beneficiary. So if I could get a motion to approve that, I would, and see if we can go forward with that.
I so move.
Second.
Second. All right, all those in favor of sponsoring the 2024 Air Race Classic in Fairhope, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Well, that's, let's go on, discussion of efforts to mobilize volunteers. Will, you want to talk about that briefly?
Yeah, we want to keep the advisory council engaged and up to speed on what we're doing so that we can utilize their valuable contributions. The members of the advisory council at present are Abe Harper, Ben Montgomery, Alan Beck, David Keller, Mac Walcott, and Bill Pennington. And I'm going to stay in touch with them on a continuous basis. And anytime any of you have any questions of them, let's keep them engaged.
Well, I had a long talk with Pam Caudle last week, and she recommended that David Keller would be the right guy to update and refresh our website.
Right.
Okay.
So is he going to do it for free, or I thought you said you had someone that would?
I don't want to engage that person if David's doing it, and I was told by Pam it's no cost, yes.
Okay. Well,
I think.
mean, we don't, I mean, the deal is to get the content. I mean, I
Right.
think if he would update it, that would be great.
Right.
Because it's not that big a deal.
Yeah, that's our more pressing need, I think, now to keep that updated. It's way out of date and it shows a mountain range on the homepage.
Well, and our biggest pressing need as we go forward is going to be somebody who has construction management experience. Because if we start building 4 to 5 hangars out there and, you know, basically being the construction manager of it, that's where we're going to have some needs. I mean, if all that comes through, well, not that we're going to manage the construction, but we need to make sure that we report and the things are being done, and
That's
there's,
right.
There's some
Some
risk there.
oversight.
Yeah, some
Yeah.
oversight. Okay, thank you, Will. Discussion of the development of the 62 acres. Don, you want to talk about that?
Nothing really to talk about. Once we learned from, was it Josh, I guess, last week or two, that last month rather, time flies, that because we took federal funding to buy that land, we cannot sell the land that's immediately adjacent to the airport, to the runway.
Well, we really didn't take federal funding to buy it, but
Well,
it does have some issues.
well, why don't you elaborate on that?
Well, it's, the funding came from the bond issue.
Yeah.
To purchase the land, but as we've developed parts of that land, the 52 acres to
62.
the south
Yes.
of the 62
Yeah.
is subject to.
Reimbursement.
Well, and subject to the FAA grant
Yes,
assurances.
yes.
And as we develop that to the north, if we develop it, it will probably become subject to those same grant assurances. And then there was some discussion last month about the through the fence operations and whether the land could be sold versus simply leased.
Right.
And then my understanding from the gentleman that was here was that he was more interested in a sale than he was a lease of the land.
Yeah, that's right. The gentleman said he had all his financing in order to buy the land, was raring to go. But I think we're in a hold pattern until we can firmly identify what we can and cannot do with that property.
Okay. Well, just to elaborate a little bit more, the gentleman, Zach McNeil, and Zach is bringing his investors, and his attorney is coming in on January 7th.
Okay.
January 6th and 7th, to kind of talk about what we can and do and what his real plan is. I don't think he's opposed to leasing the hangar facility itself.
You mean the land?
Yeah, the land for the hangar.
Right.
I think if he does do a residential community, then I think he would want to buy that. And we would not give him access to the runway either, so it would not be.
Well, he has a lot of different ideas for that property. So, I mean, if one doesn't work and the others work, so be it,
Yeah, so and if if he can develop it, that's good. So
Right.
I'll finalize, I think I've sent you an email about maybe a date. We'll see if we can get some dates, and he's gonna bring an attorney that specializes in through the fence development.
Okay.
Because I think part of his what he wants to do is build a residential area, but he wants it to where people can have their airplanes in their backyard and still have runway access.
Well, I think
so-
I think we've kind of said that's a no-go, because
Yeah.
that is through the fence.
Well, that's what
We told
Graham,
him, we told him he could actually build, have people that have interest in aviation, and they'd have to drive, they'd have to have hangars actually on the
Yeah.
airport.
that's what Graham, was it Coffett?
Toffet.
Coffett said,
Yeah.
so anyhow.
I don't think there's, I think we've squashed the idea of people, having homes and driving to, and taking their planes to the airport.
Okay. Yeah, but Zach's got ideas about museums and training centers, and he's really got a big picture.
Yeah, he does.
Okay.
So, but I'll keep y'all apprised by that meeting on the 7th, and we'll know kind of a little bit better what the plan is there. Okay, Don, you on a roll?
Well, I did, yes, this is the west side of the property now, on the Highway 98 side, and I reached out again to the real estate agent that we've been talking to in the last few months, and he said he's just too busy to do anything with that property. I know we talked with Kaiser, Leonard Kaiser, and I don't think we've heard from him lately, but two different, completely different angles of attack, and I don't really have a good report to give you in this one either, because I just don't. I'm waiting on some professionals to come up.
No problem, because we've been talking about it for 7 years.
Right.
We haven't done anything in 7 years.
Yes, and I've only been on this board for 4 months. Thank you.
Yeah. I will say this, I had a
Another
phone
week.
call from Lee Lawson last Wednesday, and he said that, this is off and on, and he said that he had some investors that wanted to build a build-for-suit on the west side. But we've been down that road a
Yeah,
couple of times.
right.
And so
I'll call him tomorrow.
Well, he wants to set up a meeting after the first year comes.
All right, very good.
So but we dangled that carrot out there before.
All right.
So, okay. Number 11, Chip, you want to talk about the airport security plan?
Well, we have to have a revised new security, not a new one, but a revised one into AlDOT by January 1st. So Joe and Don and I met, and Joe's made a lot of the changes, and Don and I are going to get together Friday and wrap it up, and then I'll send it to Jordan. I think it goes to her.
We just need to do it, so.
Yeah.
The thing I sent out this morning in the package, or the highlight, or of the changes that I made, I highlighted in yellow.
Okay.
And then pretty much everything we talked about, all the phone numbers are correct, the call tree. So if you anything else you want to add to it, just go ahead and do it and get it to Jordan. And then we'll huddle up at that after the first of the year, and there's like 7 or 8 people, like the police chief and the fire, we actually physically hand them
Okay,
copies
yeah.
of it, okay?
One thing I noticed in there is when you have the emergency number, which is time critical and sensitive, it's spelled out with an acronym. If you could also just put in the number itself, you'd save a few moments there. I hate those,
Okay.
Yeah,
when you're trying to dial something from a letter.
Okay, okay. Good catch. But what I'd like to do tonight is, even though you don't have the final, I'd like to approve it. Approve the revised security plan with the subject of whatever other modifications y'all make.
Okay.
So, anyway, can we make a motion?
I make a motion that we go ahead and approve the security plan to be submitted to AlDOT before, or no later than January 1st.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay. I just think that all those in favor of approving the security plan, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. Okay, discussion and development of new plots on the southwest side of the airport. Don, you want to do that?
Well, I think it might be time to introduce the team. Why don't you guys come sit up here if you don't mind? Stepping up is Dr. Bill Henry, retired radiologist. Underline the word retired, I think. And Don Hanson. And they've been talking to us. They've put together an LLC. That's done, is that right, guys? Yes. Yeah. And they're going to they're going to build to own. And if they want to lease some of them, that's up to them, but they're going to build to suit and enter into at least discuss, and we'll vote on that tonight, I do believe, a long-term lease, ground lease with the airport. So why don't you guys take it from there?
Don? Well, we prepared a drawing here, actually Hank Volkert did. I've turned it in there as a copy of the back of that contract right there. That looks at the scope of what we intend to do. People from Cameron to look at what we do. And what we kind of discovered was out on the southwest side, there's quite a bit of nice land to put hangars out there, and put a lot of them out there. So we were going to try for a leasehold that would be from the build line back about 80 feet and 380 feet or so this way, which would give us around 30,000 square feet, although it could go up to 40,000 square feet easily enough, which is nearly an acre. And to put a bunch of connected box hangars there. And we're going to start immediately with the construction of 4 of them. And as soon as we get the thumbs up from you guys, we're going to engage and go. I've talked with Hank at Volkert Engineering, and he's agreed to give me a proposal to do some preliminary work, for example, a topographic survey, which we'll have to have for our drainage and other things about this, to establish top of concrete elevation, and we can make sure we're out of the FAA, the woods, and lay this out. Joe just told me a little while ago that I'll give him this piece of paper right here. This actually identifies where we want to start and where we want to end. And this arc right here is referencing note number 1. That's the wingtip of a certain class of airplane with a 65.5 feet from center line of the turnaround out to where you might hit something. So we could start there and come back about 380 feet. So now a surveyor could go out there and make a topographical look at this thing, make sure that's going to fit, and site the project. And we'll go ahead and site it for 8 of them, but we're going to, like I said, start immediately and do 4 of them. And then we'll have to come in and do topographic work for our drainage and everything else we're going to have to do.
What I mentioned to Don was that traditionally, we've done the surveys. We paid for that just because we'll own them up to 30 years and we'll know that. So we'll do that. And the other really positive thing in my part is I think you're going to use Hank Eubanks with Volkert as your engineer, which would mesh with what we do. He knows what we're doing at the airport, so I think those are good things.
He's already helped us in letting us know how the road actually
He
is
also
in
tells
different
about
locations.
special grass they have to go look for. If you have a blade of it, you can't do anything.
Well, that's not good. And then I guess the only thing I was wrestling with this afternoon was the size of it, and they're going to be well under 10,000 square feet, so you would probably not have to do any sprinklers.
Yeah, they'll be.
So that's, those are all good
The
things.
airport authority would have 1 tenant, is that right?
They would, yes.
Yes, it's Fairhope Hangar Partners LLC.
And they would pay rent on that one.
1 lease. Okay.
And, like later on, if someone wants to come in and build these latter bunch of them, they could be in with us or have their own, something like that, and we'll find that out whenever somebody wants to do it.
Okay, so the 4 that you're initially going to go forward for, do you want a commitment to be able to hold those, since you're putting the infrastructure, do you want those, the ability to do those other 4 if these make sense?
Yes, but not immediately.
Okay.
It'd be later.
But I mean, if somebody else wants to come in and scoop you, we want to make sure you get a right of first.
Yeah, this
First right of
has
refusal.
8 of them in there, enough distance so somebody can have a little wider hangar than the other one will all fit in.
And the first 4 would be on the south end?
North.
North end,
North
okay.
end. This is the north arrow, it doesn't, hard to see the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would be glad to rent a complete leasehold to put in this system or something that looks like it. And like I said, it's between 30 and 40,000 square feet, whatever y'all like. I mean, y'all may say, we'd rather you go back another 100 feet or something, you may have some rule I'm not aware of. So, but it's a reasonable size.
I think just whatever Hank,
Yeah.
gives us the criteria that is required by the FAA, and
and we'll give you a right of first refusal on the,
Right.
on
The other
the, on
four.
the second phase. And
They would start paying when? When we vote? Yeah. No, I mean, start paying on the first 4 or all 8?
they would start paying on just, I would just say the first, I don't know, that's the board's decision.
Well, you start paying rent as soon as the contract's signed.
All right, yeah, right, okay.
But on the first 4 or the first 8, that's what you're
No,
asking?
everything,
On the first 8?
absolutely.
Well, that's fine with us then.
There's no
Yeah.
question, no
Yeah,
question
well,
about it.
yeah, we want to rent 30,000.
So that,
So obviously, if y'all
you don't
paying
need
for it,
the
you
full
get the fur right if you don't need one.
yeah.
Yeah.
So they don't want a fuel facility. They're gonna build their own road.
Mhm.
Can you think of, I mean, you'll triple net lease,
Say again.
triple net lease, I mean, we won't have to, you'll keep it, you'll carry insurance on it. You'll pay the utilities.
Yeah, we have to
to
get it
bring
from
those in.
Bishop Road. We'll certainly do all that.
And the only issue is the lease.
Whatever they're gonna sign.
They've already signed it.
Okay.
Yeah, I signed it all over.
Never mind.
To the airport. And here's another signature sheet. You signed it already?
So Josh,
Yeah, Josh, well, Josh and Joe.
I know
Josh,
Joe's the main one, but we do need to probably have a survey so we know the exact square footage. We have the 22 cents per square foot lease rate, but what we don't have is the exact square footage so that we know the annual.
22 cents is the right number?
For the west side.
For the west side, correct.
That's what the FAA advised, I think, was correct.
Okay, I go brain dead every time I think about that.
Stop that.
24, 27.
22 cents is fine.
22.
So, okay, and so the only issue, Josh, is that Josh has spent a lot of time the last 2 weeks redoing our lease.
Yeah,
I know,
looks good.
I know
Thank
Mr.
you.
Henson,
Thank you.
I
Thanks.
apologize, we're going in parallel pathways. We were unaware. of the
and we tried to make it
order.
as less complicated, and I think he did a great job with
Yeah.
it. If you could get comfortable with our lease, we could sign it, we could get it done by before Christmas.
okay, just kind of send me a copy of it.
Absolutely, yes. In fact, if y'all can provide your email addresses, I can send it to you first thing tomorrow.
Go ahead and send it, they'll give you your-
Let me write it out for you.
Sure, that'll be fine.
Yeah, because you don't understand it.
Well, then are we up for a vote then?
But I think we ought to, I think what I'd like to do is, we can't really approve it till we get the lease signed, but what I'd like to do is have say that the board have a
Supports.
support,
Sense of the board.
of support that we certainly would like to move forward with this when we get a lease signed. And then, is that, you tell me.
Well, one of the next items on the agenda is the ground lease,
Yeah.
the revised ground lease. And so, and I'm going back to the last meeting and my understanding of how the board wanted to proceed, but, thank you. But the idea is that if the board approves the ground lease, then all the tenant needs to do thereafter
Use
is
that ground lease.
use the ground lease and pay the required deposits.
Yep.
And then, as we've done with other tenants, we need the survey that shows the exact square
Yeah.
footage, because that's the only variable,
Yeah.
really, is the square footage and the description of the leased premises. And so, once we have those things, if the board approves the lease, then there really is not anything to negotiate. We just plug in the variables of the leased premises and the exact square footage, and we're set to go. And so really the only thing to do after that would be the formality of the board approving that lease as signed by the tenant with those variables plugged into the ground lease. But there wouldn't be any substantive changes to the language of the lease itself, again, subject to the board's approval of our standard lease and operating agreement.
Well, you and I talked today by email about insurance limits, and I think the insurance limits ought to be higher now. You said we could modify those things.
Sure, and again, what the board has is a draft, and if anybody has any concerns, Don and I had exchanged some emails about the insurance requirements. And so if we need to discuss those briefly to see if we need to increase the limits of the insurance requirements, I can make my handwritten changes, but those changes will be the lease that is approved by the board.
What are you thinking they should be?
Well, right now, there are $1 million of general liability with the airport named as an additional named insured. I'm thinking 2.2, 2.5. It's relatively little cost on a GL policy.
If that's the case, we'd be good for that too.
Yeah. My concern is that with all the hardware in these aircraft, in these hangars rather, and I'm really thinking about Continental especially, not so much you guys and your general aviation aircraft, but if a massive event happened, or if a disgruntled employee wanted to sabotage all the aircraft in there, the current $1 million would be exhausted, and we'd have no insurance left over to indemnify, to defend and indemnify the airport authority. So I think that's where I'm going with that.
Okay. At our place, our Part 145 maintenance, I had $5 million.
We've talked about that number too.
But in general liability, that for PA Aero itself was just $1 million because it was judged a low-risk place. Now, that's general liability, and then if something happened down there, like a guy taxes into one of the hangars of his property, bangs it all up, the fellow's insurance
Right.
would handle that, and the airport wouldn't be involved. It's only in the way of a slip and fall or something like the disgruntled employee, which we don't handle.
We don't have any employees.
Right.
Well, it's
Yeah,
an
we have any
open,
employees.
it's a subject that's open for discussion, basically, and so we're just trying to
How
work on
much
that.
more to the 2.5, do you remember?
The cost?
Yeah.
It's gonna be in the high hundreds.
Okay, well, that's, if it's that way, I'd just soon have it myself.
Right.
It's just, I like insurance.
Right.
Don is more experienced in building these things than I do have a couple of questions. Since we were apparently going at parallel pathways, trying to reach the same goal, having a simpler contract, would it be fair to ask you to read over ours first before you send us yours? Because there might be some ideas that you could incorporate or say, yeah, that works, or we might be going to the same place.
I can, if that's the board's direction.
Ah.
I wait for marching orders.
Okay. I'm just throwing that out. We may be very similar. I just don't know. Someone needs to read both of them, is what I'm saying.
I'll take ownership and read them both before this weekend. I've become married to that contract.
Well, and I have too, to
I
a
was
certain
hoping
degree.
Yeah.
And I just, if the board's pleasure was to approve a lease tonight, if we do that, then there could potentially be changes to what is.
We're not going to approve the lease tonight, we're going to approve the new lease tonight.
Correct.
Yes, I see what you're saying.
Now, in fairness, the new lease is for the east side,
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
not anything
Oh, yeah,
on
that's
the
right.
west
Could be
side.
two separate leases, that's right.
So it would not necessarily delay the east side lease, but it could have an effect on the terms of your lease on the west side.
If you guys can accept the lease that we've done, it's 25-page one, which I kind of went by the old 42-page.
Oh, I can tell, it looks very similar to the
Similar,
one.
but I just did a lot of things having to do with what I term a low-risk operation down there. And anybody else that builds individual hangars down there too would be a low-risk operation, not like Continental at all. And so, that lease that we did, but maybe you might have some things you want to change, Josh, in it, but might really be a nice lease for the southwest side, or, people other than Continental on the west side. And it may be a good one.
The goal was to have one lease when we started down this path, but let's do this. Let's go ahead and let the board vote to give you tentative approval to go forward, and then we'll guarantee you that we'll have you a lease that you can sign next week, next time.
Okay.
Is that-
And if you want to get me in touch with the surveyor guy.
He's in the back row.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Right here tonight?
it's not. Well, he's not, but his firm is,
Oh,
but yeah. We just, yeah, so we can do that. Does that work?
I like it because it gives them the ability to move forward.
Sure, I want to get some ground moving, some dirt moving. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, sure. This is very nice.
Okay.
I was going to do it ourselves.
So tell me again the nature of the request, so that
I don't know. The nature of the request is that the board will vote tonight to give a tentative approval for them to move forward with the idea that by next month, we'll have a lease that they've agreed to the lease that we've signed.
We could also call a special meeting. I mean, it's not hard to pull four members together for
Okay.
a vote if we needed to. We might not have to wait the full month.
Okay, that's fine, but I mean, I don't, okay.
It's not- it's an option.
Is the lease you've worked on complete? at this
Yes. It's gonna-
It
we're-
is.
we're gonna-
It's complete, subject to any, you've heard about the insurance requirements, so subject to any changes by the board this evening, it's complete.
point?
But that's the east side lease, right?
Well, it's
Correct,
gonna-
for
it
these.
was- The idea was to be the lease.
The one lease.
Yeah.
One size fits all.
Okay.
Now, the per square foot amount changes from the
And the
east
square
side
footage
to the west
changes.
side, and the square footage change.
Yeah.
What about a taxi lane? There's
It's on your
that's a name new to me. It was done by Volkert and Hank, and it was this little piece right here. And it could be grass, it could be anything, I suppose, he knows, but who does the taxi lane? See if I can show that to you.
You mean who
Who's gonna pay for it?
maintains
Who-
the
We're
bills-
responsible for doing the road
The
access
taxi
and all
Yeah,
this.
taxi
here.
lane.
Here's
There's a
the
lane.
taxi
lane
lane, and there's a
that's
taxi
described.
lane.
I think a lien
I
is
don't-
just
I don't
open
know. I haven't.
space that has to be there, isn't it?
I would think so.
Yeah.
And so we thought it, just because to save a little money, we just don't know what it would cost or how thick it has to be or anything like that. So we said, well, grass.
So a
Everybody-
taxi lane would be open space that can't be
You're talking
developed?
about the taxiway in front of the hangars, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
the
there's
access.
ramps coming out, yes, it's a
Mhm.
lane in front of the hangars. It's
Mhm.
normally provided by the airport
Oh.
everywhere, but you may not be prepared for this. And so we said, well, grass, because I just was ignorant of how thick it had to be.
Okay.
I'm sure it's not much.
So, I
We're
mean, in the
not sure.
past, we've had the little stub taxiways that have been usually built with federal funding. So that's, you know, we built T-hangars, they funded, you know, they funded to put the stubs in for the taxiway.
And because of terminology, taxiway versus taxi lane, and whether or not the feds get involved, that would delay everything. Well, since we're just GA guys, we thought, well, we can taxi our aircraft across grass. That'd make it easy on you and us, and we could go forward.
If we have money left over and we want to build one, we'll build it.
Yeah.
What would, I'm confused, what would you see as your responsibility towards the taxi lane?
Lane.
Is it lane? Okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, kinda like a
I'm
taxi
confused.
lane.
Okay.
He said a different word, a lane, L-A-N-E.
Is this what you're talking about right here, this?
I thought you were
Yeah.
talking L-I-E-N.
No.
Yeah, no.
Thank you.
Okay.
We're, as pilots, we're used to taxiway. The
Yeah.
How
taxi
many-
lane is
how
a
many
new
linear
word.
feet is that?
I guess that's something Hank
Well,
put
I'd say
out though, wasn't it?
380
You know, I'm
hours
told
to
there's a
see
new
that
FAA
dimension
thing
right
called
there.
300
taxi
feet,
lane.
how-
Okay.
I've heard it a couple times.
Probably, I think he
And
said
there
it's
was a,
25 feet. Is that-
there was
is
a,
that right? 25?
hot fueling at Gulfport, military hot fueling, and they described that they described a NOTAM as a taxi lane. They caught a couple pilots on that unawares.
300 times 25 is what the taxi.
Right, question for
lane is.
Hank. Did y'all ask him what the difference was in the terminology?
And so your question is
I'd find
twofold.
out.
One, can it be grass?
Mhm.
And then secondly, if it can't be grass, who's going to pay for it?
Yeah. And then what are the specifications for it? Like if we have to pay for it, you know what, there's a requirement like
How
3 inches
thick?
of concrete and then 3 inches of asphalt.
Yeah.
What's it going to be?
I think those would all be questions for Hank.
Hank.
Obviously, with
Well,
smaller
well,
airplanes like that, you're not gonna
It
need
ain't
Right.
much.
anything that robust, so.
Well, he said that in the phone call to me this
Mhm.
afternoon. He's going to work us up a proposal.
And, you know, in the back of my mind, I'm just spitballing here, is that, you know, I don't think the FAA will fund those kind of things for private hangars, but once the hangars are built, and there's going to be some other hangars there, then maybe that could be something that we can
Down
do at
the
some point in
road.
time.
Okay. Well, if it can be something that's, you know, not whatever too terribly expensive means, I don't even know myself right now. But I've been using $10 a square foot.
Mhm.
Got it over the internet, you know, right
That's
down
high for
there.
asphalt.
Huh?
That's probably high for asphalt.
Yeah, is it? Okay. So, but like I say, if there's money in our project and so forth, everybody wants to do it, I'm game to go ahead and pave it. I'd rather be paved. It wouldn't be paving the 380 some odd feet, it would really be just in front of the 4 hangars.
That's correct.
And then when the other 4 guys come in.
That's correct.
Do theirs.
It could be
That's
there.
correct.
Mhm.
And
That's why
these
we're gonna
4
go
hangers
both
could
sides.
even be a
Will.
few T hangers.
That's how
they
much
could
you'd
be
pay.
Right.
Bigger box, because one guy called us, a construction fellow, he would like to build one a little bit bigger. So maybe it's gonna be 3 with a big bowl at the end.
And if you had 8 hangars, maybe that cost could be, that cost becomes a little bit.
It does.
Right.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, that's a lot of, anyway, so let's have a motion that we tentatively approve going forward with do we have the group have a name?
Fairhope Hangar Partners, LLC.
Go forward with Fairhope Hangar Partners of developing the southwest corner of the airport. And part of that we'll work towards having a lease in place by the January board meeting. Josh, is that an acceptable motion?
I think that's fine. I mean, if the board approves the lease that I've drafted, subject to any changes that are discussed this evening, and I'll then email that to each of you, and if you find that is acceptable and comports with everything that is in your lease, I don't see any reason why we couldn't go forward at that point in time.
Okay. And we could have, like Don said, we could have a special meeting, get everything signed and vote on it.
And just one little thing, the check, that's gonna go to the board, but then eventually that'll come back to us in the form of the ground lease or
Yeah,
something.
it's refundable. I mean,
Okay.
we would apply it to the
We'll
ground
just
lease.
apply it
or-
to the lease or something like that.
Yeah, that'd
Yeah,
be
one
fine.
thing they have as a provision, which I like, is that money can start paying the rent.
Yeah,
It can, yeah, or if you choose and you're current on the rent, then it's refunded when you complete your construction improvements.
Got it.
Yeah.
It just let it go.
Got it?
Already spent it.
Let's go.
Well, if that's the case, then Joe, I'll make the motion that we approve the tentative, that we approve this lease conditioned on final approval of the paperwork.
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor of approving going forward with the partnership, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Congratulations.
More to work. All right.
If you want to be exact about
Thank
your
you.
note, say
And I think he's gonna spur
Goldberg
stuff.
sketch.
Well, I think you're gonna end up having more to eat down there in the long run.
And I'll get you some, I'll talk to Hank about the.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah. Well, that's just a signature page. I would,
Oh,
if you want to sign it tonight, I'd take that home, but
Josh, since we have a great segue into the lease, why don't you talk about the,
Sure.
No.
All right.
we can sit here. I think, 'cause
Yeah, you can sit here.
You're going to see the lease.
you can sit here.
So, following up on the last meeting, the discussion and direction is to try and come up with a lease, or to come up with a lease that simplified the old lease that we were typically traveling under, which was in the neighborhood of about 40 pages of materials. And so I reviewed the Gulf Shores lease that Chip provided, and also started with our existing lease as a baseline, and then proceeded to edit out as much of the surplus language as I thought did not add anything of substance to the lease itself, while retaining everything that appeared to be material and important to the ground lease at the airport, while also making it consistent with the notice of availability, because the notice of availability was approved by the board, and that set forth those sort of non-negotiable criteria that had to be in place for any new development at the airport. So it went through 3 or 4 revisions, and managed to cut it down from 40 pages to about 24 pages. So that was the version that was emailed yesterday to the group. In addition to that, and for me to try and keep it simple, we have sort of 2 potential tenants. The tenant that will not utilize a fuel farm, and the tenant that will utilize a fuel farm. And so in order to keep the lease the same for all tenants, we have the main lease, and for the tenants that, the 2 tenants that will select one of those available locations within the clustered fuel farm area when it's built, I came up pulling parts of the old lease and adding some additional provisions to come up with what I called a fuel farm addendum. And that would simply be a document that would be executed by those 2 tenants who ultimately select a fuel tank in the clustered fuel farm area. That way, we just have one additional 2-page document but there are not significant modifications to the lease itself for the two prospective tenants who desire to utilize the fuel farm area. So the two documents are the revised lease and the fuel farm addendum, and that's what is up for approval by the board tonight. And I've already talked with Don a little bit about the insurance requirements. That may be something where we want to increase the minimum limits of liability for the authority's insurance requirements. And of course, anything else within the document that we need to change, I'm prepared to make notes and modify that according to the board's instructions.
In addition to the wording of the lease, I like the way you simplified the process. That cuts through a lot of stuff.
It does, and part of the good and the bad about having a group meeting. The good is that these issues are fleshed out in a meeting like this. Part of the bad is that it's not a flexible and fluid negotiating process. You know, I mean, we can. If you make a change, then it's 30 days before we come back and talk about the change. And so if you have somebody who says, well, I need this or I need that, whatever it might be, then you're constantly coming back month after month, and it delays the process. If you've got a lease that the board has already pre-approved and you can offer that on more or less a take it or leave it basis, I think you're probably going to lose some tenants, and you may have to be prepared for the fact that some people are going to end up walking away. But at the same time, I still think that facilitates a smoother process to have the tenants know in advance what the lease requirements are and decide if they want to do business with the airport or not do business.
Well, the lease is a lot less burdensome than it was, so I think we've resolved a lot of those issues.
We've reduced, and I think made it easier.
Yeah.
I don't think we've made things more difficult. I think we've made it simpler.
But there'll still be lawyers out there who want to touch it and make it, we just have to kind of quelch that.
Pull the plug on the time clock.
Yeah, that's the problem. So do we have a motion to approve the lease?
Do we want to discuss the insurance issue first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, what's everybody's opinion? I think my scenario I laid out a little while ago about a disgruntled employee being a pretty reasonable scenario that could destroy far more than $1 million of hardware and create we're going to get sued. I mean, if something happens here on the property that we own, we're just naturally going to be named as well, that's all.
Josh, give Don an overview of our indemnification.
Well, there's two. There's the indemnification with Continental, so that any claim or lawsuit that arises out of their operation, and that is the result of their, I won't say their negligence, but if somebody claims that Continental was
slip and
negligent,
fall.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
then Continental would indemnify the authority for any act or omission that results out of their use of their leased premises. We also have the indemnity provision, a similar indemnity provision that's carried over into this lease, so that the tenant for these ground leases also is due to indemnify the authority for any, again, alleged negligence by that tenant on their leased premises. The concern is that, and I'm generalizing, but most tenants are not going to have the wherewithal of a Continental Motors company. And so that's where the insurance becomes critically important in this lease, every bit as much, if not more, than in the Continental lease, because we're very likely going to be in a position of asserting that indemnity, but also relying on the insurance and not necessarily the wherewithal of any particular ground lease tenant that might just lease a hangar pad. So the insurance, I think, becomes, like I said, as important, if not more important, for these ground leases for the individual hangar pads.
I think I'd like to defer the question for a little bit of study. There's a gentleman that has volunteered to, he's an aviation insurance specialist, and he's in town here. He's actually one of the airport's renters. And he's made himself available to review and offer his suggestions on the limits of liability and how, with the things that Josh is talking about. And I think that I'd like to utilize his services before we make a decision.
And that's okay. Can you get with Josh before the next meeting?
Certainly.
Josh, while I'm thinking out loud, there's $1 million in environmental insurance.
Correct.
We don't need that for just a general hangar. That needs to go into the, into the addendum, the fuel farm addendum.
All right.
In my opinion, there is no, the environmental liability from just a straight hangar with a fuel, oil, water separator is almost negligible. So you don't have to have, you don't need environmental liability insurance.
I suppose the only way that that would become an issue, there's a prohibition in the lease against the storage of any hazardous
Yeah,
materials.
yes.
So you'd have to run it, you'd have to, in essence, have a situation where somebody was in violation of that provision, stored hazardous materials, and those materials somehow leaked into the ground.
On the ground, I mean, you're gonna have a 4-foot concrete pad with an oil water separator. I don't know how it gets there.
All right.
So that's just,
So the change then would be to move the environmental impairment insurance from the primary lease to the fuel farm
Fuel farm.
addendum.
yes. I didn't think about that until this morning. So anyway, so let's make a commitment to get Josh any comments that we have before the 5th of January, or the 7th of January. And that way you can finalize it before the next board meeting?
Is the board comfortable with me submitting this document to prospective tenants, or are we going to wait until after it is fully and
I know
finally
what you're
approved?
talking about. We owe,
Certain prospective tenants, I think, would like some kind of a
I'm comfortable
response.
submitting it to prospective tenants with those.
Changes.
I'm more than happy to visit with you very soon on this issue.
Okay.
Okay.
And I don't have any more changes. I'm done. I'm shut down on it.
So this is Tuesday, if you could have that to Josh by Thursday or Friday,
Yeah.
let's go ahead and approve it subject to.
To your
Final insurance requirements?
Yeah.
I can do that.
That would be great. Because we do have somebody outstanding that we owe them a response.
Okay.
And again, I think, obviously, the board can be comfortable that what's already in there is the minimum insurance requirements, and it would only increase from that
That's really what I'm talking about.
baseline.
And is this perspective, let's see, going to have a fuel farm or not?
They will.
They will.
They will have a fuel farm.
Okay.
They will have a fuel farm. Okay, do I have a motion to give Josh the flexibility to move forward on the lease, approve the lease, subject to some changes? some
The insurance
changes,
requirements.
Some insurance changes from Daimler Guard?
I so move.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor of of that motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. Thank you, Josh, for your labor of love.
Sure. All right.
Chip, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm actually getting a text from Vince. He must be watching us on TV. It was about insurance. He said, yeah, he's gone to a funeral. He said that we need individual liability insurance. A fuel tank can leak hundreds of gallons from a leak. He said, I asked him, he's talking about for the board or land leaseholder? He said the land leaseholder. So what, I don't know if we have in there that they have a
he
individual
possibly-
liability insurance.
Did he possibly mean environmental instead of individual?
Let's see. Are you listening?
Now, the fuel tanks, I know about those, they'll have to be
We have, yeah.
tertiary protected. We had a double wall ballistic rated tanks above ground.
So does he think the individual hangars need $1 million worth of insurance, environmental insurance?
I don't know. I'll just ask him if he wants to
Anyway,
call
we
in.
Let's,
We can,
we'll address that. All
Yeah,
right.
that's something we can. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all for listening.
You want to update us on the IRS?
Or you can, but there is no
There's no update.
update. The gist of the message that we got from our bond counsel is that he has not received any update from the Internal Revenue agent who's handling the audit. And bond counsel, that is, was not surprised by that. The long and short of it is we comply with deadlines, but when the ball's in their court, then we stand by. And
45 days later, we haven't heard anything, which is disappointing.
well, hopefully that means that everything
No news is good news.
is according to what bond counsel has written, which was very good. But the long and short is there is no substantive update on the IRS audit. Recovery for Southside fence
Yeah.
repair is about 100 feet of fence, linear feet of fence
Yes.
that was
It's gonna be, I got an estimate for $2,500, not 2,000, so $2,500.
$2,500. I did not see, we did obtain a copy of the accident report. We know the individual who was responsible for this. That person was incarcerated and to my knowledge still may be incarcerated. But I did not see any information regarding insurance coverage. Lots of times on the accident reports, there will be the notation
Stand by.
about who the,
His Vince, he wanted to
Okay.
phone in. You want to go and finish?
no, if he's on the phone, let's go ahead.
All right, you're on speakerphone. Do what?
No, I was just listening. I'm riding down the road. I was just listening.
That's scary.
We gotta be careful on our insurance. We gotta have obviously liability insurance that protects us, indemnifies us. But if we get large hangars that have 3 or 4 airplanes in them, something happens, causes a leak, there could be hundreds of gallons that could be an environmental spill that we have to have insurance to protect us against in an individual hangar. And it's probably more likely to happen in an individual hangar
In a
when it's
fuel
left
farm.
there sometimes days and weeks unattended than it would be in like a continental hangar where there's somebody there.
Which might suggest we should just leave the environmental.
$1 million in where it
Yeah,
was.
because I mean, someone jets in a hangar and holds 1,000 gallons of jet fuel and you have a fuel tank rupture, you might not know it until it's gone into the ground, so.
We need to have it in both places.
Right, have it in the primary lease and the addendum.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Vince. Good clarification.
Didn't mean to interrupt, but I'm riding down the road.
Sounds like a song.
Thanks.
I'm gonna hang up and listen. Bye.
Ah. All right, that's good.
Modern technology.
But I don't have the name of an insurance company or whether this driver was even insured to be able to make any kind of a claim.
I know.
There's always the option of suing the driver directly. Of course, you have to wonder if you recover your costs, what you would ever get out of that person if in fact he was uninsured when he,
Well, don't you have to have insurance to drive?
well, legally, yes, but not everybody does. And there's a reason that people are cited for driving without insurance, and some people just do. But the option would be to file a small claims case against the driver individually and hope that he did have insurance available to pay the claim.
What's he still in jail for? Was a DUI involved?
There was an article
There's
that was in
more
the
to it, I
news, and he, I think, was already being sought after for other things.
Failure to appear. or whatever.
And this
He
was,
had a rap sheet.
this was the opportunity that law enforcement might have been looking for to get a hold of him.
He doesn't have insurance.
That's
More than
my impression.
Now, would our insurance,
$1,200?
would our insurance cover it?
$2,500.
Our insurance is, we've got a $50,000 deductible.
Okay, well, never mind.
We might as well eat that.
So your pleasure is just to let it lie?
What is the jurisdiction of small claims court of Dolomite?
They recently changed, but purely for a small claims action, I think that goes up to at least $6,000. Then you have the district court, which is recently, same court but different docket. District court was recently increased to $20,000. So those are your
Well, it wouldn't cost $50 to file a small claims court. would
It very likely would be your filing fee and then a little motion for a default judgment.
Yeah.
Probably would
Find out.
be
Yeah.
the end result. And then you can record the judgment and,
It goes to work somewhere.
that's right, that's right.
I'd say, let's do that.
You okay with that?
Sure, we can do that.
All
We
right.
can absolutely do that.
I don't think that needs a motion, that's just house. That's just-
No, it is a lawsuit if the board would,
Okay.
if the board would authorize a small claims action against the individual responsible for the destruction of the fence.
You got an address?
You do?
Yes, that is in the accident report.
Okay.
And if need be, we'll have a process server deliver the summons and complaint.
All right, so do we have a motion to file against our fence destroyer in small claims court?
I so move.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Okay. All right, final thing is, or final thing in the attorney's report, it's kind of a discussion of where we are on the different plats.
I think we can really just cover these in one fell swoop. I know that subpart 3, 13 and 14 is new interest, as I understand it, or somebody's expressed an interest fairly
We have
recently.
a letter of intent.
A letter of
that's been
intent.
submitted.
But the one fell swoop is that I will be providing the newly approved lease to all prospective tenants.
Okay.
And with the instructions from the board that this is the lease, and they will have 30 days to submit the final document and the deposits, and then it would be, if they do that, it will be approved at the next regular board meeting.
I would like to encourage someone, I'd like the letter of intent was great. I'd like to know a little bit more about what that business is and what the business plan for plots 13, 14 is.
Well, I can probably address a little bit of that. It's in, a lot of it is in the letter. Now, we're talking about Mr. Garrett Turpak's letter? Yeah. He wants to put in, and Chip, chime in here if you care to, he wants to have an airplane repair business and avionics business. There is no avionics repair shop here in this field.
There's one.
Continental has
I
one.
think that's true. I don't think that's true.
Well, I'll eat those words if I have to. He wants to put up an avionics shop regardless. And he says he's working on the financing. He says he's getting pretty close, as the letter says, and that's where we are.
What about flight training?
Well, that's another thing he mentions at the bottom, is he wants to have some flight training. He's got a flight training school, Chip, I believe in Arizona somewhere right now.
I don't know all the details, but that's the long range, according to his letter, that's a long-range plan. It's starting a 141 Part 61 flight training program, which we do not have at
Which
the airport.
we would like to have.
The first hangar he wants to build, he's talking about primary purpose is aircraft maintenance. And then he'd like to follow up with an avionics shop. at some
Is that
point in time.
inconsistent? I mean, does our lease preclude, with Continental, preclude any other tenants like that coming into the airport?
I'll have to check, but I'll be glad to check into that.
Yeah, we need to look at that on the lease to make sure.
So, I mean, I don't think it does. I mean, but we need to make sure we have a great relationship with Continental. We don't want to jeopardize that. And then I'd like for, you know, this LLC to come and make a formal presentation to what their what their short-term plans are and their long-term plans. So I welcome, you know, having 2 new large hangars built on the airport, but at the same time, I'd like to have a sense of what their long-term plans are. Can we work through getting them in January?
Yeah,
I'll be glad to come.
Yeah, I would think so. He's been out of town going through training on a new airplane, but I'll call him and we'll make sure he's here next meeting if he's in town. We'll work something out.
Okay. Any other comments on that? Well, that's good, all good, so we'll see where we go from there. Continental, Matt, you want to come, Nick, you want to come up and visit? Matt, Nick, you want to come up and visit? Introduce yourself.
Nick Van Houten, the new FBL operations manager at at Continental. I was working at Continental prior on the other side of the bay. Now I'm over here with you guys. And kind of more encompassing everything on the south hangar, all three hangars in one. So we've kind of done a management readjustment. So I have the maintenance, the FBO, and the avionics shop, all the flight line and fuel and duties as such. So there's changes are coming, hopefully for the better. It's my goal.
And Nick is an active pilot. He owns a Stearman. He lives on a flying community over south of Mobile. So
Okay, a Stearman.
Yes, sir.
had a Bonanza he just sold.
And a
so,
Bonanza, yeah. So you see me flying in and out.
And is very excited about aviation, the
Yeah.
possibilities here.
Yeah.
Sure, so
he-
any
he-
way I can help, lend a hand,
A lot of good
even
ideas.
with the other tenants, definitely not
Yeah,
against.
we visited the other day, and Nick's got a lot of good ideas about promoting thermal aviation in the area. So it's kind of exciting, breath of fresh air. So
What was your last name, Nick?
Van Houten.
And it's VAN capital H.
H-O-U-G-H?
HOUTEN.
I'll send you all this contact
Okay,
information.
great.
And
Well, welcome.
I'm there 6-7 days a week, so don't hesitate to reach out, trying to, improve our performance there and just help grow.
This is not a shy group.
Yeah,
You'll hear good and bad.
yeah, and that's what I hope, I know we have our fallacies and working to change that for the whole community, because that's, I like airports. So.
We're all here.
And we did share the NetJets event coming up.
Yeah, why don't we go through the action items? Abandonment of the aircraft, Josh, that's an our report, isn't it?
Oh, I meant to address that earlier. The abandoned aircraft, I did two things. I got in touch with Dr. Egerton, who pointed me in the direction of one of their in-house attorneys, Robert Preston. And they had handled a similar issue at St. Elmo's Airport without having to file a lawsuit. And so what that involved is first contacting or sending a notice to the last known address of the person who left the aircraft to the airport, which Continental did have in some of his paperwork. So I sent a certified letter advising the person that if they did not contact me, the authority was going to proceed with remedial action to remove the aircraft. Haven't gotten the green card back yet, but that went out last week, so hopefully I'll get the green card back. Or the letter may come back unclaimed, in which case that person has moved on and we don't have any contact information if the letter's not claimed.
Can we act if we don't have any contact?
Yes, because if that happens, then we will publish a short notice in the Baldwin County newspaper. And after that publication notice is run, if within 10 days the aircraft has not been reclaimed and all the associated fees paid, then by law the authority has the ability to dispose of it. So this appears like it will be accomplished without any kind of a lawsuit filing.
That's a Bonanza.
That's the beach
The
craft?
yellow one sitting back on that back fence. It's been
Oh,
there
yeah.
for ever.
So if we get to that point, can you help us get it out of there?
Not a problem.
Okay, right, all right. You want to talk anybody about the liability, your audit of liability insurance?
If y'all don't need me anymore, I'm gonna take off. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chip.
Thank you.
Give me a holler. We'll plan on getting together Friday.
Indeed, it will.
You're still here.
Nick, in fact, this is part of your discussion.
You've got a whole section here.
Oh, nice, okay.
See, I did it right there, all that.
Okay.
All right, buddy.
Thank you.
Nick, we've been doing, we've embarked upon an audit of the various, I think there's 32 hangars, T hangars out there. And we just want to make sure that the airplane on the certificate of insurance matches up to the reality, and they didn't sublease it to somebody, which is not allowed in our lease. So the aircraft and the document are correct, that we're named as an initial named insured, and that we're still talking about insurance limits. So, that's a little bit of a variable right now. But this is something that David's been collecting over the last month and a half. So that's something you might want to look into to see how we're doing with approaching 32 hangars.
Okay.
And I think in the last meeting, we were 25 of 36 or 25 of 23 or 35. 23 or 35.
I'll follow up
We're
on
getting
that.
close to the end, yeah.
Okay? The environmental insurance, I got from Dorothea, I've got an endorsement today that said they had $1 million of true liability insurance for environmental liability insurance. And with the state pooled of $1,750,000,
Correct.
I think we can remove that exception. What do you think?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Yeah, she just added that.
She just added us as a, for that, she added the fuel tank. So we have $1 million of true liability environmental insurance, which would, plus with the state pool, the $1,750,000 that you're at, I think we've got our $1 million, our $1 million bottom, if you will. Now, having said that, I'd want more environmental insurance, but I mean, I think Continental has enough pockets. If something really bad happens, you can handle it.
Okay.
Josh, are you okay with that?
Say that one more time.
No.
We just lost our quorum, and so I'm trying to make sure that we can continue. So I apologize, I really was
Oh, okay, so.
trying to
so
figure out a
this is
procedural issue.
This is the discussion point then, so we can't really.
We can have a discussion point, but I don't think the board can take any substantive
Okay.
action.
Well, anyway, so we'll carry this over, but in my opinion, I think we solved the environmental insurance.
I think so.
I'll carry it over next time. Final thing is, NetJet, the NetJet promotion, why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, so in March, off the top of my head, I forget the dates. I think the last week of March, for 4 days, we're going to have NetJets and CJAA flying, but it's not really a flying. More of a formation clinic for those guys, but an event to bring in some corporate jets and also some of the classic warbirds again. A lot of fuel sales and also a lot of flying action going on.
This is when?
Last week of March.
And then the thing to me is that they're gonna have, NetJet is gonna sponsor a corporate event and try to encourage people, that'll be a big deal. That'll be a big deal. There's like 40 or 50 customers of NetJets in this
Fairhope.
market, so I think.
Oh, really?
Yes, sir. In Fairhope, there's what I would call a significant
Oh,
clientele, but I would like to invite you guys once we know all the dates and all.
Yeah.
I think it would be good
And we'll help you promote
for
it.
you guys to show.
We'll help you promote it. Okay?
Okay.
Anything else? We appreciate it.
Not for me. I'm happy to be here, and just let me know if I can do anything in any way, even outside of.
is David still
Yeah.
at the airport?
Yes,
David's
he's
on
still
board?
there.
Team-
He's just he's more the manufacturing side on the north hangar, so you'll see my face a lot more strictly for the aircraft operations and the FBO and such, but
Okay.
we'll both be involved, but probably my face more so.
Okay,
A pleasure.
Okay.
thanks.
I'm gonna do the engineers report. Hank couldn't make it, but the final meeting for the AIP walkthrough for the 2019 project is finished. I reviewed it, went through out there a couple of weeks ago, it looks good. Vince is gonna do the final walkthrough on Thursday morning at 9 o'clock. So we'll be through with that project for 2019. We'll get our tentative CIP approval 1st of January. That's when basically the FAA says, we submitted the CIP list, and they'll tell us, what our go is for 2020. So hopefully we'll know kind of what we got going on in 2020. That's really it. I'll do the treasury report. I think you've got that in your package. The only thing that on the revenue side, because since we didn't get some of the grants, since we didn't get some of the ground leases signed, we optimistically thought we'd get them signed in October. Some of those ground leases, we thought we'd get 2 signed. Since we didn't, you can see there's a $23,000 revenue shortfall for the first 2 months. Again, I think we'll catch up with that when we get some leases signed. I feel pretty positive about that. And the ground lease, and then on the farming leases, we actually collected the money early. So it actually went into 2019, so we'll be on a catch-up mode all year, but the farmers paid all their lease, they'll pay the 2020 lease, 2020 will be in 2020, so it'll even out, but right now it's a little bit behind. Expenses we always do a pretty good job of expense control. Any questions about the financials?
Sure is a nice report. I
Yeah.
know she does it.
It is good. The balances, you can see You can see there's some seasonality in our deposits, our bank balances, and they're starting to grow, and they'll over the next 6 months, they'll get up to, $400,000 or $500,000. Then we'll have to pay our principal. Any questions about that? Any other business? Anybody want to comment from Josh or anybody want to add anything else? Anybody, what about anybody from the floor? Anybody want anything to say? We got some visitors. Who are you?
Damien, I came in last year from Australia, Commercial Pilot.
Okay.
First chance I've had to come back and see you all this evening.
And then we have a friend from Goodwin Mills.
David Parker from Goodwin Mills in St. Louis.
We'll get with you afterwards about the, finish some work to do. All right, now how do we adjourn this since we don't have a forum?
You can,
Got to stay in session.
you can, you're right, where somebody get Chip back, right? No, you can adjourn the meeting without a quorum. That's a procedural
Let
motion.
me ask you one question. Did this, at 3:30, did it work better or worse?
It worked much better for me. I appreciate the
I liked it, it
consideration.
didn't bump into dinner.
Okay, well,
Yeah, happy hour.
Well, I think it worked. Amy couldn't come. She's closing Airbus's year end, it's their year end too, so, anyway, so that's it. So, all right, then I'll make a motion to adjourn. Have a second?
Second.
Okay, so all those in favor of adjourning, signify by saying aye.
All three of us, aye.
Merry Christmas, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much.